Hey everybody, it's Lottie Dottie and everybody. Since we likes to party, hey, we're gonna get started in just a moment. Just inviting folks as I do each week, and it's a warm one today. You all know I love the sun, but I realize that when I'm sweating, it doesn't look all so cute on camera. Inviting and hello to those of you who have already joined. Let me know if you can hear me okay, good people. How y'all doing? Okay, I'm gonna go on and get started. In fact, I may have to shift because I'm directly in the sun. And I can't see the way that I want to. Hey, welcome everybody, Lottie Dottie and everybody. I'm gonna actually just move out of the sun. In fact, I might as well get out in the elements. Shucks, what the, oh great, thank you for commenting. I'm gonna get out in the element because I can't see you the way that I want to. So, hi everybody, I just wanted to check in with you. Let me do a little something to adjust. Okay, yeah, the thing said pause for some reason because I cannot see my screen. I know you're probably looking at me laughing, but we're going to get it together. Literally, the lights or something is off, and there we go. All right, here we go. Fixed. It's fixed. Okay. Perfect. All right. So clearly this is some retrograde energy that I wasn't prepared for today. And I didn't even expect it to be a factor in because I've been feeling really great about this particular season that we're in, although it has been super intense. You know, it's really been an interesting energy that none of us really can control. The only thing that we can control is ourselves. So just gonna take a little perch up really quickly here, and I want to talk to us about some of the things that concern us. A lot of times I'm gonna just jump right into it since it took me so long to get started. You know, we're in the pre-eclipse season. Mercury went into retrograde, which governs communication, travel, electronics. So whatever you're doing, don't put your liquids by your computer and think, oh, I got it. If you hear yourself telling yourself, go get up, do this so that you don't drop the phone in the water, do it. In other words, a retrograde simply invites you to slow down and take into consideration every move that you're making in a way that you are mindful and that you are taking extra care of yourself and others. I tell you, everything that could be happening today is happening, from me stumbling with the phone and everything. So tell me, who's still live in here that I haven't accidentally cut off or anything like that? I can feel the energy today. Like, I've almost dropped this phone like 3 times. And I'm getting a lot of inboxes about some of the emotional stuff that's happening in individual lives. It's not necessarily one size fit all, whereas one person is having a lot come up around money. Another person may be having something coming up around safety. There's a lot of that has been happening on the internet with cyberbullying, trolls, a lot of things that sometimes when you're out there putting your freedom out there that we aren't even aware of, that comes to us and comes at us. Venus was just in Cancer for 2 days. Cancer is the home of our emotions and our emotional court. And so you may have been feeling the emotions, but it sounds redundant because we keep on talking about the intensity that each particular cycle is bringing. That's because this entire year is a 1 year, and it's a driving year. It's about how we are driven to do things, to respond to our life, to not be passive about the goals that we've set. It is about us positioning ourselves. And so, you know, on that note, I guess that's a good place. In New Orleans, some of you all will know, in New Orleans, we have this saying, or they have this saying, I'm just an adoptee. But anyway, in New Orleans, we say this thing like, oh man, she drove. She drove. Hey, y'all familiar with that? Are you familiar with that saying? Drove. That person, oh, she drove me. That girl right there is drove. When it comes to our language, a lot of times we've heard the word purpose driven. We talk a lot about, oh, you haven't heard of that saying, Dawn? I know if Chandrika is still here, then she may have heard it and definitely use it because she's a New Orleanian. And any of the folks from New Orleans, you heard that term drove. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about our language because when it comes to our positioning ourselves, getting in position to prosper, money, our relationship with money, we've been talking about how we feel about money. We've been talking about the shifts we need to make around money, our desires around money. And many of you sit under pastorship or teachers that talk about the power of life and death is in the tongue. The power of life and death is absolutely in the tongue. We hear that, but a lot of times we don't give it any weight. We don't give it any of our attention. And our language is a reflection of that. And so it's something that you hear all the time about the power of words, the energy of words. But then I just like you, I've heard it, I've taught it, and still there are times when I have to catch myself in what I'm saying about myself, about my relationship to my desires, and especially my relationship to purpose. And when it comes to purpose, we talk about the power of our words, but we don't talk about the purpose of our words. The purpose of being verbal as a woman, as the feminine. Many of us were born into existing conversations, and I use this term all the time. What is our money conversation? What is your conversation about that? When I say that when I talk about that term, what is your conversation about a particular place, thing, experience, a person? I'm talking about the inner chatter that happens, and also the imprints on our subconscious mind from our life experience. Each of us were born into an existing conversation. So let's just start right there. What conversation about money were you born into? Was it powerful? Was it purposeful? Was it something to put you in position? And if it was something to put you in position, what position did it put you in? Because that's the conversation that is operating inside of you quietly, even if you are successful, even if you are an achiever. Most people oftentimes, Dawn says it was negative. It can be many things. Thank you for adding the language to it. The money conversation that many of us that are born into can be negative, it can be positive, and it can be non-existent. Some of us were born into situations where the conversations about money was struggle, or survival, or hustle, or regret, fear, guilt, shame. And then there were some of us who may have been born into conversations where it was very positive. It was attached to something. It was attached to get your education so you can have money. Get a job so you can have money. Some people may have been brought up literally to hustle other people in order to have money. Some people may have grown up on different parts of the world and they have a different conversation about money. If you all know about the East Coast known for being quick talkers, slick talkers, always got something to sell you, always got something to say. And so they always communicate with that syncopation. People oftentimes assume that someone from down south is that because they talk slow, they think slow. Or people from down south have a southern drawl, so that people think that maybe they're dumb or we're dumb. Because I'm from the south, born and raised, baby. Even if I'm a cosmic being, I understand that I'm not limited even to where I was born, because many of us already understand that this is not our first lifetime here. But when we were born into certain conversations as it relates to our money, what were they? What position did it put you in? And are you continuing that legacy even in your conversation? So let me just give you an example. I'll use my experience. My mother was, she retired from working in a kitchen. And that was hard work. She had calluses on her feet, burned her hands. And so my mother had a conversation that started before I came along, whereas my grandmother literally worked and picked cotton in cotton fields. My mother even picked cotton for a time. And her conversation was different about money. I'm going to jump in and get yours in a minute, Messy. Thank you. You can drop yours right on in there. My mother definitely had this thing about saving your money for a rainy day. Not depending on anyone. Her conversation around money was always trust-based. And also being able to be independent. So a lot of emphasis was get your education so that you can get a good job. I come from that generation. What about you? Am I the only one? I come from that generation. I did not grow up with entrepreneurs in any way, except for those who came after the generation that took care of me. And when I say that, I'm talking about the village. What was yours? So what money conversation were you born into, and are you still having that same conversation, or do you want to have a different? Hey, cousin, thank you for saying some words in there. Some of us were born into a different money conversation where maybe they were educated. So they were the ones who went to school, they got the degree, and perhaps they have some success. They got the degree. Those are considered the baby boomers, who literally, this is when women started to climb the corporate ladder. I don't know about you. Let me ask, because this is not me. You can raise your hand proverbially. Were you groomed by someone who talked about, or who was focused on climbing the corporate ladder? Because even with that comes a message about money, and it feeds how we talk about money in the negative, the positive, or in the non-existent. Then there are some who were born into situations where there was no conversation about money, whether you had it or whether you didn't have it. You just didn't talk about much at all. Okay? And so that starts to form your conversation about money. When I talk about conversation, that's the one that you were born into. Now, what about the one you get introduced to? This is number 2. The conversation that you get introduced to. A lot of times it does begin when you're children and you go over to a friend's house and they have all of the toys. They have all of the things that you want to play with and you don't have it. Or when you start going to school and there's some popular thing that everybody is getting and you want it too, and that's when you start to come in contact with the ability to have what you say you want. Come on now. I'm going to pause and let that digest and catch some of your comments before it gets too late in the broadcast. Bessie says, mine was confusing because some people considered us well off because we owned a business. But my mom always bought secondhand and used everything secondhand and used everything, and we lived a very modest life. Okay, Sharonda said, nope, she's in there with me. And then Chandrika said, education was taught by my mom, but my dad always worked for himself. My dad's entrepreneurial nature wasn't favored by my mom. That's a good point. Who taught women, Chandrika, during that time how to really get behind the family business? Because most of us, no matter whether we inherited a conversation, got introduced to a conversation, or the third one I want to introduce is ignited. An ignited conversation around money. An ignited conversation around money is after you've inherited a conversation, you've been introduced to another conversation around havingness, then what is it that we get ignited by? Because sometimes for that person who was introduced to I want but I cannot have, or the one who I always get what I want, you have a whole different relationship with my own natural energy yield as it relates to money. And so underneath all of that is either fear-based or love, okay? And this is why it's such a hard conversation sometimes for us to have, because there's so much shame and guilt that gets trapped in the inherited conversation, the introduced conversation, and the ignited conversation. There's so many assumptions even that we make about ourselves and our ability that are never addressed until we become curious enough to inquire. That's my final I statement, is to inquire. I want to introduce another conversation, the purposeful conversation that is the purpose driven conversation is the one that you can inquire. And then inquiry always is better than assumption. And so I want to catch what you're saying, Chandrika, as far as your mom not supporting his entrepreneurial nature. Come on now. How many of us support our own entrepreneurial nature? Because, again, we've been taught to rely on a paycheck, which is, to me, it really has been a game that has been played on us. There are documentaries that you can watch that I'm not making this up. I'm not a conspiracy theorist like this. This is facts out here in terms of our relationship to money. And going back to being driven or drove around money, I use it lightly, and I guess only those who are from New Orleans really understand being drove. But many of us are so drove around our conversations with money that it clouds our listening, our ability to hear the clues that successful people are dropping all the time, including myself. Even when resources are given, we may read that thing or look at the title or read the chapter and say, we'll get back to it. Because the only thing that we tend to respond to is the urgency of whatever it is that we have at the time. And what happens is survival mode becomes urgent. Everything is urgent when we're in survival mode. Everything is fear-based. Will I have enough? Can I have it? I was just talking to a client, and I was working with her around her vision for herself, her purpose-driven self. But the conversation that she was having was the drove conversation. That's slang now. She was drove by nickeling and diming herself. Now, we have already laid the foundation that money is energy. If you have a nickel and dime conversation with yourself, you are going to be more on the left brain side, where you're analyzing, you're making decisions based off of the evidence, you are trying to control it. That's what budgets tend to do. Usually budgets are very lack-based ways of thinking, and I know that there are people who teach that, but budgeting usually starts off with a feeling of lack. The question that I ask you is why? Where did that come from? Is it something genetically? Okay, do you think that there is something in our genetics as it relates to this whole idea of money and having this. Are we driven or are we drove? Based on the inherited conversation, the conversation that we are introduced to, and the conversation that is ignited within us around money, around purpose, around positioning. Bessie says, after my father's death, mom became an alcoholic and I became a hustler around 13. No conversation about life in any form. Well, yeah, that's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. You actually did have a conversation. I remember when I was doing a network marketing, I think I told you all this story before. I was on a network marketing team that was very successful. We were exceeding our marks. Many of us were able to make some amazing strides with this company. And when we got the attention of the leadership, the particular network marketing leader was from the streets. She came from a mother who dealt drugs, a father who also was a drug dealer, but also did time. I think he may have either been in prison or killed. She had a whole different relationship with money. She understood. She had situations where her lights were turned off, where they had been kicked out, damn near homeless, living in rat-infested places. And so you gotta believe, even if nothing was being said outside of her mouth, there was a conversation happening. Those conversations oftentimes sound like, I'm never going to be in this situation again. I'm always going, whatever it takes, I'm going to have it. So I'm glad that you mentioned the hustler, because guess what? Some of us are intellectual hustlers, because we may not be hustling out there in them streets. We may not be on the strip pole, but we still have a relationship with money that is with our inner conversation and language about money and ourselves that is based off of a very low vibration. And so even if you're an intellectual, spiritual, religious, virtuous woman, you can still have a very low vibrational conversation that's based on hustle. Because the biggest hustle is, if I be good, if I'm a good woman, if I be good, if I don't have sex until I'm married, if I get me a good husband, then I'll be taken care of and life will be fine. Come on. How many of you thought that? If I go to school, I get this job, then the next order of events is I get married, in that order. And some of that didn't happen. If you happen to be a young mother, there's another conversation that happened for you around money, right? And is it a driven conversation, or is it a conversation where you're drove? If it felt right typing it, but to say it, you know, the English teacher in me really, the English teacher in me has a hard time trying to position it in this talk. I can say it when I'm sitting around talking to people from the South because you get it. But for you Eastern Midwesterners, y'all don't get this drove piece. But you can put it in any language that you want. What's driving us is the question. What is driving us when it comes to our what we say yes to, what we say no to? One of the reasons that I was so inspired to position Super Soul Sister Sunday on Sundays around yes for the entire year is because when I read what Shonda Rhimes, what she did, she literally is an introverted, shy woman who had an overactive, crazy detailed imagination. So even though she did not do a whole lot of talking out loud, she had a conversation going on to the point of movies and plots and dramas and all of that. And so she was very comfortable in her own mind. But one of the things that she was not is verbal. And one of the things that I read is the way she described the gut-wrenching pain of having to come out of who she comfortably was and was successful. That's what's key. Her introvert self was successful. Literally. She had no inner money conversation of lack, but she was purpose-driven. But something that drove her was staying the same. It drove her that she couldn't show up for herself in a way that allowed her to not play so safe, even in her success. And when you read the book, she gives you so much detail about what happens to her bodily functions, what the inner conversation. She has a very, very snarky mind. She has, with herself and with life, she just has this way of having this snarky, sarcastic conversation that she let us in on the year of yes. And one of the things that was so powerful is a lot of us, we talk ourselves out, no matter what our positioning is, whether it is the one we inherited, the one we got introduced to, the one that got ignited. If there is no inquiry, we tend to defend the position that we're in because of fear, because this is what we've known. If we found a way to float, if we found a way to do okay for ourselves, sometimes we hold on to that position so tight, and usually it is our language. It is the things that we say, and it's the things that we don't say that shows up in our conversation when life invites us to the mat, when life invites us to get to the game, when life invites us to be purposeful, to be purpose driven. Usually it sounds like something around time. Time is usually a energetic conversation as well as value driven. Okay, let me see what some of the comments are. Dawn said, I had to change my belief system around money. Well, how did you do that? Where did you start? Chandrika said, I believe it was both fear and shame. My maternal grandparents promoted education and good jobs. My paternal grandfather worked for himself and promoted it with his sons. My dad had all girls. Very, very good observation. And the question that we all get to ask is, do we continue the same conversation about money? I'll give you another example. My nephew is actually about to complete his master's degree with an MBA. He's getting an MBA. And my husband and I were talking to him. We were having a casual conversation. We started off talking about this new mumble rap. And he was giving us his perspective about the mumble rap. We were giving him ours. And the whole basis of the conversation was the Jay-Z 444. And my nephew was saying, well, it ain't all about the money all the time. And I was shocked to hear that, because he's actually going to school to get a college degree. And he said, money is the root of all evil. Well, that goes to show you that you can be going to school to study how to manage other people's money. If you still have the belief that you are only learning something so that you can get a good job, you're learning how to be a good employee. And your language betrays you. Your language will keep you being a good employee. Your language will talk you out of every time you say, I want to, but I got this bill this month. Guess what? You're always going to have a bill this month. One of the biggest things that we're going to talk about in the Money Charm Master class, but it's Money Charm strategy. It's not just us, the way we talk here in the supplementals. This is going to be real strategy that you can apply to your product, to your project, to your purpose, and to your profession. Okay? Power of the P. It's not just about pussy, because pussy is nothing if it does not have the power to govern herself accordingly and to make decisions, to position her, to be able to position her family, to position the desires of her heart. And of course, when I say pussy, I say it from a reverent place, and I know that it's a trigger for some people. If that's a trigger for you, please send me a note and we can have a conversation or do a whole live around why that word is a trigger. Because, of course, in my other work, you all know that I believe that it is the woman who takes what has been made profane and makes it sacred. Even in this way that we talk about money, our language is everything. I'm pausing because of the traffic, or the bus or whatever just passed by. Plus, I probably need to take a breath. Whew. Now, if you learn, if he thought that money was the root of all evil, we had to hurry up and correct that and offer another thing. Now, he's grown now, so that belief is already set in. And it's shocking to hear a young person who's so progressive say something that's so disempowering. But many of you may have taught that, or inadvertently taught that, by exposing people, your children, yourself, to religious conversations like money is the root of all evil. Well, if money is the root of all evil, then what's going on with mega churches? How do we justify that if money is the root of all evil? Okay. But that is not true. You try not having any. Let's see what evil. That is evil. When people don't have it, they start doing desperate things. Okay? And when money is looked at as far as paper, what they're talking about is the schemes and plots that have been attached to greed. That's a different energy than the actual medium of exchange. It's a medium of exchange because it's energy. But a lot of times we denounce our energy by what we pronounce over our lives. We denounce our energy, we denounce our dollars because of what we pronounce over our purpose. You cannot continue to have such lofty desires and goals and kick your own ass about what you don't have. At some point, you're gonna have to interrupt the lack conversation. Everything you say after I am is literally, factually, truthfully creation. Whatever you say after I am, you are creating that in that moment. Now, this is not just some hocus pocus type of talk that we're talking. When in the money charm, we're going to talk about some power words, some real power words that really put you in the place to be purpose driven and not purpose drove. Because, you know, a mother who is trying to feed her children say, I'm purpose driven. I'm driven to put food on the table. But the truth of the matter is, really, we're drove. I'm back to my New Orleans terminology. We get drove, meaning it's driving us. We're not driving it. That's all I mean by that. Okay. Bessie said, I have to say amen to that. Chandrika said, that was me. My steps were ordered. That's so misquoted. It's the love of money. Yeah, the love of money. But yeah, so I don't know. Let's break that down. Again, the Bible, let me tell you something about the Bible. You can quote the Bible the way you were taught it, but the versions of the Bible have changed so much from the Aramaic, from the Hebrew. And we've been given so many different versions that there are so many spells that we pronounce on ourselves when it comes to our relationship with money. Knowing what you know about money is my own natural energy yield, if you say the love of money is the root of all evils, you're still saying the love of my own natural energy yield, the love of my own natural energy is the root of all evil. So that goes back to feeding this thing around trust. We're going to even talk about why we have such an adverse reaction to people trying to sell to us. This is something that's verbal. This is something about language. If you are in the subscription group, I'm actually going to get into more specifics around this whole thing, the cues that we have around language. I'm just trying to be mindful of the time, especially during the summertime. Bessie says, my money issues became loud after being unemployed for almost 2 years recently. Before then, I was always looking for my hook that I would love and make money doing. We all absolutely can have something that will send us into struggle. So listen, I'm not just talking about casual conversations where you feel like, okay, I just want to get something off of my chest. Because think about that. When you're getting something off of your chest, what are you doing? It's called that for a reason. Because people do actually get challenged when they feel like their language is being corrected. That's why even as you learn spiritual truth, you allow people to do more correcting of themselves unless you are paid, hired, sought to coach, mentor, or teach them that. Because usually people want to say what they want to say. But if you were to take command over the words that you are using around your relationship with money, what is that conversation? Where did it start? What's the middle part? How did it continue? What ignited another thing? You just gave a great example of an ignited conversation, Betsy. When you say you lost your job, it ignited something else in you. Sometimes we have to put that fire out because we'll still be operating off of a survival program in our language, in the way we talk about it, or the way we don't talk about it. A lot of us do not have what it is that we say we desire because we're too afraid to actually say what it is we desire. We're too afraid to ask, to inquire. We're too afraid of what it sounds like or what the appearance of it may be. So I do want to hear more from you. Just because I started late today, I do want to end the broadcast, but I wanted to catch let me catch your comments. Dawn said, money answers all things, so I don't subscribe to that. Okay, gotcha. She hurried up and corrected that. Okay, gotcha. And so it is. I'm going to close on this. When we talk about magic, and maybe I should do another broadcast. Tell me if you're interested in just a little extra one. Do you know that there were some people who were afraid to, when we first initially were doing the initial teachings on money charm for free on YouTube, almost, I think every day we were doing this? People were afraid because of the word charm. Because of the word charm. Charm, to some Christians, had something to do with witchcraft, or the fear of what it would be, what it would look like if they align with the idea of something magical. If that's not you, don't worry about it. But if that is you, send me an inbox and tell me if that's you, who have been spooked by those kind of things. Yes, the word charm, the word magic. There are Christian people who, when they see the word charm, magic, when they see the word goddess, you all tell the truth in here. I don't have to speak for you. You can tell the truth about what some of those words were that threw you off. And I would just say that oftentimes it's those very things that hold the most information, because we're spiritual people, and it's the disassociation of ourselves that keeps us in lack. Most of us feel so disconnected from our energy as being that thing that can attract what it is we desire. And there's so much more I wanted to share and say about that. So I feel like I am going to do a little extra one later. But, Bessie says, how should I rephrase my post? Or are you trying to get me to see something else? What post are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm waiting for you to tell me what post you're talking about, Bessie. Because I'm teaching in general here. Unless I call your name, I'm not really going. That's one big thing that we do. What posts? Because we assume that people see all of our Facebook posts, and we don't. And that's one of the things I'm going to be teaching in Money Charm is many of you are using a platform that is based off of algorithms and money. And right now with Facebook, unless you pay them money, you do not see everybody's posts. So stop assuming that people see all of your posts. I have no idea still what you're talking about losing your job here, what you posted in here? Okay, if you're talking about what you're in your comments here, you don't have to reword that. That was an experience that you had. How do you see it now? Do you see yourself as losing your job? Or do you see yourself as being invited to play a bigger game in your life? That's a good question. On that note, that's a very, very good question. Like, I don't use the term boss. I stopped using that years ago because energetically, that's the same thing that's plantation language. Some of us say jokingly, I got to get up and go to the plantation on Monday at the end of a weekend or a holiday. That is also energetically going to keep you a slave if you feel like you're going to the plantation. How can these things serve you? The thing, I can't afford it. I can't see it right now. Well, it's not feasible. I just don't, come on. Like, there are so many limits that we put up, but then we'll go and invest in something, and we'll get excited about other things and invest our words and our language on other things. So yeah, definitely a slave mentality. So I'm going to do another installment where I can get a little bit more specific. I know it's summertime. August is that downtime before parents get ready to go back. A lot of people are on vacations out in the sun. So I'm going to do a little something else. But if you're in the actual subscription group for only $29, it's going to go, the $29 is going to go away on the 11th or midnight on the 10th. It's going to go away, and the class will be definitely open to the public, but at a different price point. And I encourage you to get into this. I'm not trying to get rich off of this monthly master series, but I am trying to do small doses of concentrated modules and deposits so that we can grow our community to be in a position to prosper for this first one. The next one we'll be dealing with our relationship with our men, and then we're going to go into our money. Then we're going to do some more. So I look forward to sharing more with you. Thank you for joining me today. I found a cool spot. I was going to stay in the car because I just didn't want to be wiping my head and all of that. And forgive me for any retrograde scatteredness today. I wasn't expecting it. All of the dropping of the phone and starting late and all that good stuff. But thank you for those who hung in there with me. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'll talk to you later. Ciao.